If you've saved $2 million for retirement, first off, congratulations. That puts you in the top tier of American savers. But here's the reality. A $2 million retirement today doesn't go nearly as far as it did 10 or even 15 years ago. So in this video, we'll unpack how inflation, healthcare expenses, taxes, and longevity are reshaping retirement for a lot of Americans today, especially those with the $2 million balance. And more importantly, we'll talk about what you can do now to make sure your retirement stays on track. And be sure to stay until the end where we'll walk through a real-life case study showing how all of these different scenarios and all of these different decisions you can make with your $2 million retirement can impact you and how to make sure you're successful. And before we dive in, my name is Ryan Knoll. I'm a certified financial planner and founder of NAV Wealth Partners, a financial planning firm that helps my clients make smart money decisions. Let's jump into the video. Just a few decades ago, $2 million felt like an unshakable retirement cushion. Today, not so much. Inflation has averaged around 3 to 4% annually, and healthcare inflation has been around 5%. That means your expenses, especially medical expenses, are set to double over the next 15 to 20 years. And if you have kids in college or are just getting ready to start college, the inflation rate of a college education has been about 6% on average annually since the 1960s. So it's easy to see how that $2 million nest egg might feel a little bit smaller. If you're 60 today and you retire tomorrow, your $2 million portfolio will likely need to last you 30 to 40 years. That's a long time to be withdrawing, and your dollars are losing purchasing power every year. At that point, it's not only smart to understand how much you need to live, but how much you can safely withdraw from your portfolio, and then understand how things like taxes, taking Social Security, and planning for healthcare events can make that $2 million last longer. Let's say you retire today with $2 million and no pension. How much can you withdraw each year without running out of money? The old 4% rule would suggest $80,000 a year, but that assumes moderate inflation, steady markets, and a 30-year retirement, and it doesn't factor in things like long-term care or rising taxes. More conservative models today suggest a 3.5% withdrawal rate is better, especially if you're planning to retire before the age of 65. That drops your spending to closer to $70,000 a year pre-tax. And that's assuming a balanced portfolio and no early market shocks. But retirement typically has a spending curve. When you first retire, you tend to spend a bit more money. You're doing more traveling, you're going to see your kids and your grandkids more and spending more money on them. But then as you wind down and you reach your 70s, spending tends to wind down with you. You will likely maintain a lower level of spending at this point and keep that for the rest of your life, unless you have a long-term care event. And statistics show that at least one spouse in a married couple over the age of 70 is likely to incur a long-term care event. These typically last 2 to 3 years, and they can cost you over 6 figures of dollars from your portfolio in each of those years. So it's very easy to see how after taxes, a long-term care event can be upwards of $200,000 a year and wipe away 10% of your portfolio in any given year. That's why they need to be accounted for. And this is where planning becomes very important, because I have seen firsthand the best retirement plans blow up because they have not factored in a long-term care event and have not properly planned for one. Before we dive into planning for long-term care events, let's talk a little bit about Social Security. If you're retiring before 62, you'll have a stretch of time in which you have no Social Security income. That's what we call the gap years. That means your portfolio is going to carry the full weight of your expenses until those benefits kick in. And that creates a front-loaded strain on your portfolio. Let's say that you're spending $100,000 a year and you plan on retiring at age 58 and you plan to take Social Security at 65. Even if you expect a $40,000 Social Security benefit annually at that point in time, you're still spending about $700,000 to get through those gap years. That's a third of your portfolio. That's why it's so important to have a plan as to when to claim Social Security. If you plan to spend more early in retirement and you don't have family longevity history, then taking Social Security early may be beneficial. If your parents and grandparents all lived into their 80s or 90s and you don't think you're going to spend more early in retirement, it's going to be more of a level distribution, delaying your Social Security could be a great plan, especially when you factor in things like Roth conversions, IRMA surcharges, and estate planning. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Finding a good financial planner who can run you through each of the scenarios and the potential impact that each has on your portfolio would be a great place to start and can help make this a very easy decision. Now let's switch gears and talk about healthcare again. The average 65-year-old couple today will spend over $300,000 in healthcare costs in retirement. That does not even account for long-term care events. If you retire before Medicare eligibility at age 65, you'll be on the hook for private insurance, which could cost as much as $1,000 per person per month. Even with Medicare coverage, you'll still have premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket costs. And long-term care, assisted living, or in-home support could cost another $100,000 to $300,000 depending on how long it is needed and the severity of the event. If your plan does not explicitly include those costs, it is not a complete plan. The marketplace to purchase health insurance does not have many options that differ much from a cost standpoint. It is important to be aware of IRMAA surcharges, though, so that you don't have to pay more than your fair share through improper planning. Where you can really solidify or completely derail your retirement is with long-term care coverage. Most people with a $2 million portfolio will find it hard to maintain principal when someone incurs a long-term care event. Therefore, you may not be able to self-insure with a $2 million portfolio. That's why it's so important to have a plan. Whether that's through purchasing a traditional long-term care insurance policy or funding cash value life insurance with a long-term care rider associated with it, it is something that needs to be considered. Because even with a $2 million portfolio, you may not be able to self-insure depending on your spending level. Another thing to consider is your HSA. If you are not quite in your 60s and ready to retire yet, consider maxing out your HSA. Anyone over the age of 50 can contribute up to $9,500 to their plan, assuming they have family coverage. Do that for a decade or more and invest those funds. You will be surprised how much of a long-term care event you'll be able to pay for tax-free with that type of an account. You can also pay a portion of long-term care insurance premiums tax-free with funds from your HSA. You are subject to certain caps annually depending on how old you are, but it is possible to partially or fully fund a long-term care event tax-free. For a more detailed breakdown on how HSAs work, be sure to check out the video I made last week, The Ultimate Guide to HSAs and FSAs. If you're finding this content helpful, please be sure to throw this video a like and subscribe to the channel. We have bi-weekly videos that will cover similar topics and even more when it comes to thinking through your retirement plan. Let's jump back into the video. Now let's assume that you're 60 years old and you're thinking of retiring. But what if you work just one more year? That's one more year of saving, one less year of withdrawing from the portfolio, and one more year of portfolio growth. In multiple real-life plans that I've run for clients, one extra year of work can increase long-term success of your retirement plan by as much as 15 to 25%. Sometimes it's not about working 5 more years, it's just about one really well-timed year that sets you up for solidified success in your retirement picture. So let's actually take a look at some of the different planning techniques that we can use to tie this all together. We're going to look at a brief case study where we'll look at retirement ages, Roth conversion strategies, having long-term care insurance versus not having it, and showing how each of these decisions can impact your chances of success in your retirement. Let's jump into the case study and you can see firsthand how I work for my clients and apply it to your own situation. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to walk through some of these different decisions a couple with $2 million ready to retire might be making. So in this example, we have a couple, John and Jill Smith. They have an overall net worth of $2.48 million, $2 million of which is just portfolio assets or what they have to live off of. So let's just click in here and see some of the different scenarios that John and Jill have. So they're both 60 years old and they're both retiring at 60. So just for sake of this example, they both have the same exact birthday. So let's break down their net worth a little bit more. So you'll see they have cash on hand of about $75,000. They have $200,000 invested in a joint brokerage account. Jill has $285,000 in her IRA, and John has a little bit over $1.4 million in his, a primary residence of $480,000. They're completely debt-free just for sake of this example. So they have a net worth of 2.48 like we saw on the previous screen, but if we back out their primary residence, portfolio assets are just $2 million, which is what we're concerned about here because that's where they're going to gain their cash flow from in order to live off of. Look a little bit deeper into their income picture. John's collecting Social Security of $30,000 a year, and Jill's collecting Social Security of $17,500 per year. We have Social Security starting at age 62 for both of them, so 2 years from now, when they're first eligible to start collecting their benefits. Taking one more look at their expenses here, they're currently spending $115,000 a year. So when you factor in the income that they're receiving of about $47,500, you back that out of income, they're spending roughly $70,000 a year from portfolio assets. We're also assuming, federal tax rates apply to them. They're in the state of Pennsylvania, and I live in Pittsburgh or Allegheny County, where we have a local tax rate of 1%. So I'm just assuming that for John and Jill Smith here as well. So you see we have the full picture baked in. Granted, this is overly simplified over what most clients will look like, but it gives you the high-level overview and a completely baked-in picture of everything we need to consider when looking for retirement planning strategies. So the next thing we want to do is we want to click into the retirement plan. And we want to go to the base plan, or, where exactly are they sitting? So we know that if John and Jill make absolutely no changes, they're starting with a portfolio here at retirement age of about $2 million. And then by the time they reach age 90, that portfolio is projected to be worth about $250,000 less, so about $1.75 million. So let's say we know a couple things about John and Jill. Let's say it's really important for John and Jill that they spend a little bit more money the first 5 years of their retirement. Ideally, they want to do it for the first 7. But let's say for the first 5, it's absolutely imperative that they have the ability to spend $25,000 more on top of their average annual expenses, because they have been putting off trips to Europe. They've been putting off trips through taking their grandkids to Disney World, and they want to enjoy their first 5 years while they're still young and able to do so. So we're going to model in a scenario here where John and Jill, they take an extra $25,000 a year. So unsurprisingly, this decreases their lifetime portfolio value. So you see we start with the same number, but because we're taking an extra $25,000 in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we have less money in the portfolio. And when there's less money in the portfolio, there's less interest to be earned through growth. So they're actually about $875,000 worse off than they were before. But when you look at it and say, hey, do we realistically think you're going to be able to retire and still have money left over at age 90, whether you're passed away by that point in time or you're still living? The answer here would still be yes. So even though this decreases their lifetime portfolio value quite significantly, they technically have enough money to do so. So that's the first thing we're going to look at. So it's just the adaptability of their spending plan. And if I was their financial advisor, I would greenlight, $25,000. I might say maybe we scale it back to 20 because that'll, help us on the tail end of the plan, give us more flexibility. But I don't see any reason right now as to why we couldn't do that. So we're going to toggle that off for now. So we're right back at the base facts. Now let's say we're walking through a Social Security picture. Now let's say they're debating on whether they want to take Social Security at, age 62 or age 70. Now, there's many different decisions you can make in between there. We're not going to walk through all of them because this is just a simplified overview. But let's just say that's the binary decision they're trying to make, 62 or 70. So currently how I have it set up is they're taking it at age 62, which is going to start right here. But let's say they delayed age 70. What happens to their retirement picture when they delayed age 70? Well, you'll see actually something pretty drastic happens. They're only expected to have about $164,000 left if they were to not take Social Security at age 70. And that's because they are spending quite a bit of money from their portfolio, especially early on with the additional $25,000, which isn't factored in here yet, but let's just factor that in now. I would tell them as their financial advisor, look, if we want to delay Social Security because you expect a higher benefit payout, even if you have longevity in your family, I don't think it's going to matter because I don't think your assets are going to last much past age 86. If you want to continue to spend $25,000 a year, more in the first 5 years of retirement and delay Social Security. So I would say for them, taking Social Security earlier is better based off their spending pattern. Now, there's other qualitative factors that we need to think about, and there are things like average lifespan and what they plan, how they plan on living the first few years of retirement, or specifically their 70s. But just for this binary decision that we're making right here, doing Social Security or taking Social Security later does not make sense for John and Jill. So I'm going to toggle that off. And let's get back to where we started before, which is no changes made to the portfolio. So let's say we wanted to talk to John and Jill about converting John's IRA or John's 401k to a Roth IRA. Specifically, we would want to fill up the 22% bracket every year. So ideally what we're doing is we know that John and Jill are peeling off money and collecting Social Security up to a certain level. And let's say that level's below the top end threshold of the 22% tax bracket. What we would recommend doing is say, hey, John, we want you to convert more of this large balance you have here up into the 22% tax bracket level. That way we're locking in a lower tax rate because we fear down the line, if we don't do this, your required minimum distributions are going to become quite large. And when they become quite large, you're going to be pushed into higher tax brackets. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open up a Roth IRA for John, and we're going to do conversions up to the 22% bracket. So we see that adds quite a bit of value to the portfolio. In fact, they're about $1.3 million better off, a little bit more than $1.3 million better off than had they not done the conversion. So, what happens if we delay Social Security? Well, if we delay Social Security, we're still not in a great spot. I mean, we're better off than if we were to just spend money outright in the first, 5 years of retirement, but we're still seeing a decrease in value. And let's say we've solidified in stone that we want to spend $25,000 the first 5 years of retirement. If we were to delay Social Security, even with the Roth conversions, we're running out of money by age 88 as opposed to before when it was age 86. So I'm still going to recommend we don't do anything with Social Security other than take it early. And you'll see here, even if we spend an extra $25,000 the first 5 years and do these Roth conversions, we're accelerating taxes paid in these early years, which is why you're seeing this blue bar not fill up as high and there's a more gray area, which is the loss of value here. But over time, specifically after we reach age 75 and required distributions start, we start closing the gap. And then by age 90, we end up being about $100,000 better off than what we were prior when we were just taking the $25,000, over the baseline scenario. So then John and Jill might say, hey, it was really important that, the first 5 years were covered, but ideally we want 7 years where we can spend $25,000. So what I would do, I would go in there and say, okay, let's model it in. So you'll see we have it from 2025 to 2030. We're spending an extra $25,000 annually. So what if I bump this to 2032? We click save, it'll take us back to the last picture. Where does that leave John and Jill? Well, John and Jill are worse off than they were before, obviously, because they're spending more money, but they still have about $1.5 million left over for retirement at that point in time. So whether they're still here and they need to live off of this money, or they're no longer here and they've passed this money on to their kids, they still have $1.5 million left over. For me, that would green light, hey, we need to do a Roth conversion. This is where the most value is able to be had in their portfolio. But then second, it also meets their ancillary goal of 7 years of an extra $25,000 as opposed to just the first 5 years, which is exactly what they wanted. And I would be very happy as their financial advisor to see this projection, because I would sit here and say, there's no reason why you guys can't afford to do 7 years as long as you're willing to do this Roth conversion strategy. Obviously, it's something we're going to have to monitor, and every year we're going to make sure these numbers still are good and we're going to rerun these numbers. But at this point in time, I would not hesitate at all to say, yep, take 25 grand out over a 7-year time frame, extra 25 grand out, but we need to do these Roth conversions. I think we're still going to have about $1.5 million left over by the time you guys are age 90. So what does a sustainable retirement look like with $2 million saved? Well, first, it's one where you spend around $80,000 to $90,000 a year max, especially early on in retirement. You delay Social Security to when it makes most sense for you based off of your expected lifestyle and lifespan. You want to build in at least $300,000 of long-term health care and support costs. Consider Roth conversions in the gap years and fill up low tax brackets effectively to mitigate RMDs in the future. Stay invested with a well-diversified, tax-efficient portfolio. And finally, reassess spending every few years to adjust for market realities and where you're at that point in time. And most importantly, track your withdrawal rate. If you're pulling out more than 4% for several years in a row, that could be a warning sign, but it may not be all that bad, especially if you're planning to spend more early on in retirement and then scale back later on down the line. That's why it's so important to have a plan and so important to work with an advisor who's in tune to what that plan is. If you're sitting on $2 million and wondering whether you're ready for retirement, the truth is it depends, not just on your assets, but on your expenses, your goals, your taxes, and your health. The good news is most of these things can be planned for. The bad news is too many people wait until they're actually retired to start doing the planning. Get that plan in place now, one that doesn't just assume averages, but prepares for worst case scenarios as well. That's what gives you the confidence to actually enjoy retirement, not just survive your retirement. Now, if you found this video helpful, make sure you subscribe for more content just like this. And if you want help building your own custom plan tailored to your specific retirement goals, regardless of the balance you have in your account, check out the link in the description for how we can work together. My name's Ryan Knoll. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.